Welcome to today's meeting of the Adults, Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is taking place at County Hall in Glenfield. This meeting will be broadcast live via the County Council website and will also be available for viewing after the meeting. Can everyone please switch their microphone on when speaking and turn it off when they have finished? Thank you very much. So the first item on the agenda are the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of September 2023. I propose that the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of September are taken as read, confirmed and signed. Does everybody agree? Thank you. Agenda item 2, question time. I have not received any questions from the public. Agenda item 3, questions asked by members under Standing Order 7.3 and 7.5. I've not received any such questions. Agenda item 4, there are no urgent items. Agenda item 5, declarations of interest in respect of items on the agenda. Do members have any declarations you wish to make? There was a question I just asked about light bulb, in that all members who are members of district councils, their own districts will, I take it it's just recorded that we're district members as well. Are you happy with that? Thank you. Declarations of the party whip in accordance with Overview and Scrutiny Rule Procedure Rule 16. Do any members have any such declarations to make? No, thank you. Agenda item 7, no petitions have been received. So our first substantive item is the Care Home Sustainability and Quality Report at pages 13 to 18 of the agenda. I know John's kicking us off, and again, I think if we can just assume that people have read the reports, and that perhaps if we can just ask the officers to pick out any particular highlights they wish to reinforce, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So this first report provides the committee with information on the allocation of government funding to adult social care in order to provide a sustainable care market, and gives members an update on the quality of regulated care in Leicestershire and how the council is seeking to support the sector. So I'll ask Kate if she will take members through the detail. Thank you.
Thank you. The report in your pack, as John says, seeks to provide an update to the committee on the market sustainability of care homes within Leicestershire, and focusing particularly on older adults, and explaining where we are in terms of residential care and also nursing care, and we provide an update on quality. So in recent meetings, you've reviewed fair cost of care analysis and the market sustainability plans, which were published and submitted to the Department of Health and Social Care. And in June, you considered a report relating to the Market Sustainability and Improvement Fund, otherwise known as MSIF. So Leicestershire received a main MSIF grant of £5.6 million, and that was explained within the June report, and a second grant was subsequently issued in July, what's known as the MSIF Workforce Grant, and that was £3.6 million. And that needs to be spent in at least one of the following 3 areas: increasing fee rates, workforce capability and retention, and waiting times. We've allocated the second funding grant to provide further support to the care home market. And as from the beginning of October, we implemented a separate new fee rate for nursing care placements of £900 a week. And then there was a further uplift to our normal fee rate for residential care from £715 a week to £750 a week. However, we do still have a £7.7 million pressure on the council's in-year budget for this area. We're working alongside health colleagues in the Integrated Care Board to improve alignment in commissioning of nursing placements, as well as a number of other operational and strategic areas, including the contract, quality improvement and contract management processes, so that we're more aligned, although some differences still remain. We continue to support care home providers with a range of different areas, including quality and also responding where they report financial difficulty to us. And if that is the case, we invite providers to speak to our commissioning service so that we can consider the case for exceptional support. However, we implemented annual uplifts for our care home placements in April 2023 to take account of inflationary pressures which they were experiencing. Turning now to quality, we have 159 care homes in Leicestershire, of which 26 are nursing care homes. 79.6% of care homes are either outstanding or good, according to the Care Quality Commission, compared to a national average of 82.7%. In the East Midlands, we're more in line with the regional average, 79.6%, as I said, against the regional average of 79.2%. We know that CQC are undertaking fewer inspections and are increasingly targeting their activities on providers of risk or those who haven't been inspected for a significant amount of time. We've done a great deal of analysis and support work where providers are rated as it requires improvement or inadequate, and those have included for reasons of medication, leadership and oversight, handling of mental capacity assessment and deprivation of liberty safeguards, assessment, care planning, monitoring and review, and health and safety maintenance and the environment. And together with the City Council, who have equivalent considerations, we've set up workshops to be proactive or more proactive with providers on priority areas of support. And there's a wealth of support available to care home providers to increase their quality and leadership. We ourselves internally have introduced a new monitoring tool format for all of our services, which has been used and helps us to identify risk associated with providers, which we can then use to tailor support. And the sorts of things that we're finding do mirror the concerns found by CQC. So all agencies appear to be identifying similar issues where they arise. Just coming to the end of the report then, we continue to engage with providers both on an individual basis, but also overall as a market. Only this morning we had our monthly care home provider conference call, which was attended by over 40 representatives of the council and providers. And we engage on specific issues, update on latest guidance, etc., as well as updating on strategic matters and seeking their engagement. Just by way of context and to finish, our budget for this area is very significant. For this financial year, it's £112 million. So in conclusion, the report, I hope, has been helpful in providing the committee with information on the sustainability of the care home market in Leicestershire and also quality considerations. And you're invited to comment on the contents of this report. And if it's all right, Chair, I will just ask my colleague Dave Pruden, Lead Commissioner, whether there's anything he wants to add.
Thanks, Kate. No, not at this time.
Betty.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive report. I'm really looking at page 15, paragraph 18, about where we are in terms of those that are rated outstanding or good, and we're in the third quartile when ranked against all others in England. I just wondered, and we seem to be more or less in line with the regional medium as the report states. And I just wondered, what else could we do to actually increase our ratings? Thank you very much.
Thank you. We have, over a number of years now, actually worked with our regional colleagues and in national networks to identify practice elsewhere within the country and to identify what might be different in the East Midlands to nationally. There's no easy answer to that, unfortunately, and I think there's a wide range of complex variables at play that means that things are a little bit different within the East Midlands. And as you say, Leicestershire is broadly in line with quality for the East Midlands. I would say we're probably doing all the right things. We just need to keep doing them and to ensure that our providers are well supported, that we respond to financial difficulty that they may be in, and to consider whether exceptional support might be required. But I think the day-to-day activity of continuing to support providers, making sure that they have quality improvement strategies in place, that our contract monitoring ensures that the people of Leicestershire are getting a quality service, and we hope that over time that will bear fruit.
Bill.
Thank you, Chair. Yes.
Sorry, Bill, before you come in, I think John wanted to add something on that last point. Sorry, Bill.
If I may, Chair, yes. I suppose what I would say, in addition to what Kate's stated, it is concerning, obviously, that we're in the third quarter. I would obviously want to be average or above average. If you look at the figures, we're at 79.6 and the median is 82.7. So it's a fairly narrow band. We have 160-ish care homes regulated in the county. So what that means, in effect, is that if perhaps 2 or 3 of the care homes that are currently requires improvement were to be rated as good, would be in the median group. So it doesn't take an awful lot to move from one quartile to another, is what I'd say.
Thanks, John. I'll let you come back, Betty.
So much as where we are, it's more or less to do with the provision of the service, ensuring that they get the best quality service that can be. It's that more than the league tables that I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Sorry, Bill, your turn.
Well, mine's quite simple. On page 14, item 12, it mentions there about block contracts. And I've looked at that recently. Is that a more financial beneficial to us than any other sort of contract to fill the places we need?
That is something that's being considered at the moment. We're not committed to it at present. It's something that we have been considering and may implement over the next few months. We hope that not only will we be able to get a more beneficial rate for the block contract, but it will also provide certainty of capacity, that we can have beds and placements for people who need them over the difficult winter months and potentially beyond. Dave, is there anything more you'd want to say on that?
Only to add that you need to move very carefully with this sort of contract arrangement. We are in touch with other local authorities who have used it, and as a result, we are moving cautiously. I think it's important to say that, but it is an opportunity which must be explored.
Just think, Chair, is it for 6 months or 12 months? I mean, that's the essence is, you know, would it help us over the winter period if we enter a block contract and not in the summer? I don't know what the rates are in different times of the year, but it might look a variable one, so we can do it for 6 months of the year.
Yeah, you're right. You allude to the way in which we've used block contracts in recent years, often just over winter, often to mitigate pressures with discharge. What we're looking at now is the idea of having a much longer term arrangement. So a situation where there'd be a 2 or a 3 year contract with a block that ran for that length of time, enabled us to sort of sustain those areas of the market that we need to do business with most.
Les?
Thank you, Chair. So thank you for that and for the report. So I'm subbing today, so fresh eyes sometimes ask new things. So I'm just curious whether you've got the information to hand. So, and absolutely recognising John's comment about how narrow the banding is between being in the third and the second quartile. So we have 79.6% of care homes rated outstanding or good, which is great. if I understand this correctly, so 133 are care homes and 26 are nursing homes, which nursing homes by default will have very different dynamics to a mainstay or mainstream care home. What do those percentages look like in the actual nursing homes? Because essentially there's different things at play there. So it's just idle curiosity if you happen to know the answers.
I'm afraid I can't give that to you now, but I can certainly respond afterwards. I think John may well have an answer.
Yes, I don't have the percentage, but the last time we looked at it, we had a higher percentage of good and outstanding in nursing care than in residential care.
Barry.
Thank you, Chair. Going back to this block contract, obviously giving someone a 3-year block contract is beneficial to the care home in getting that business. So are we making sure that we're only giving those to, say, outstanding care homes, so that it acts as an incentive to bring others up to that level?
That's certainly what we'd seek to do if we did decide to go the block contract route. We hope that will be the case. Of course, it would be entirely up to providers whether they put themselves forward for the opportunity or not. And if we did go to that project, there would be a lot to consider around the variables, how many in each home, etc. But we would certainly seek to do that at the upper end of the quality market. I think Dave might want to add something.
When you look at outstanding and good, it's quite a small proportion of homes that are outstanding, a very small proportion. So it probably wouldn't be possible to go on the basis of just outstanding, which is, I think, what you were asking. But in terms of quality being a key criteria, then yes, certainly good is in our thinking. And of course, good is an overall rating, but there are different ratings within that rating, and we might even fine-tune it for certain within that rating as well. There's a balance to be struck with making sure that people of good quality are in the contract, but also that you can have a field that will potentially bid to offer the service. And I'd just make one other observation about the percentages that we're measuring against region and national, is that one of the challenges is that the CQC are not checking homes throughout the country. They're focusing on areas of difficulty. So quite often homes have not been visited for a number of years. They could be sitting with a good categorization, which was right 3 years ago, but isn't necessarily now. And that's why we outlined the other sections in the paper where we talk about the individual work that we're doing through our contracts and quality team in order to assess and understand the quality of what's going on and to try to improve.
And in fine with good and outstanding, it's about bringing that other 20% up to the levels, and those that are close to that, that's quite an incentive for them to get into that thing. So that would help. Thank you.
Les.
Thank you, Chair. And just again, idle curiosity, because I think, funnily enough, the last time I sat in on this meeting was somewhere around COVID, where, as an authority, we were having to give great assistance. What does recruitment look like in the sector nowadays, and for Leicestershire? It was, nationally, it's a challenge. So I'm just, again, curious.
I think there still are recruitment, but particularly retention challenges. There's been very recently, actually, a Skills for Care report issued on the state of the workforce for the country overall, and there are some particular themes for Leicestershire as well. International recruitment is something that has been used by Leicestershire providers increasingly over the last couple of years. I think more so in home care than in care homes, but I think there are some sponsored staff working within care home environments. There are more men now than ever working within adult social care, which is beneficial, but there are increasing challenges around the ageing workforce and people increasingly getting closer to retirement age and not necessarily being able to provide the staff coming through that will fill those places. So as ever, a complicated picture.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Kate.
Any further questions, members? If I just say thank you for the report. In fact, I was going to make the point that Dave made, that I was fortunate in my early days on this committee to actually go and visit some care homes with our team here, who I have to say I found second to none. And the amount of help and assistance they provide to care homes in bringing them up to standard, making sure they are of the right standard, was great. And it just occurred to me, I wonder if perhaps newer members of the committee might welcome the opportunity to have a visit with our team, something we could look at in the new year, because I found it invaluable. I went with the Len portfolio holder and we had a great day out, and I learnt more in probably one day than I've learnt in a myriad of reports. So it might be worth, if we could bear that in mind, perhaps to make that offer available to members of this committee, because I think seeing our team in action gave me immeasurable reassurance that even if CQC aren't in there checking, we are. So could I thank Kate and Dave? And I said, if we can put that on the thought process for early next year, that'd be great.
Thank you, Chair, and we'll certainly be able to facilitate that visit if members wish to do that.
Well, thank you for that. So we note the report. We're now moving on to agenda item 9, which is managing demand in adult social care, which is pages 19 to 44. We'll just give time for Heather to. We give time for Heather to get to the table. Oh, don't worry, Heather. Take your time. These chairs are fairly immovable. Right, so I think John's just going to introduce, and then Heather will take over. But again, Heather, if you work on the assumption we've all read the report and just sort of, I think give a background flavour about things that might not be in the report is always extremely useful and rewarding to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So again, this report provides members with information on the current demands on adult social care services and the increased costs to the council of meeting that demand. And in response, there is some information about the demand management programme that's commenced within the department, which includes additional activity and the implementation of a fair outcomes panel to oversee expenditure. The report also provides committee with an update on the numbers of people currently on caseload and or awaiting assessment for social care services, and is an update to a report that I think we provided about this time last year. So I'll just hand over to Heather. Thanks.
John. Yes, so we brought a report around it was called Managing Weights and Risks last November, first report. So it was highlighting our performance against national performance and what we were doing internally to try and address people who were waiting for assessment and services. So delighted to bring this back again to you in two parts. First part around the demand management programme that we've put in to address some of the huge increases in demand that we've had since COVID, really, and how we're addressing that, and an update on how we're managing with particularly people who are waiting for allocation, etc. So taking that you've read the report, I wanted to just highlight, as John has, the rise in demand for home care, residential care particularly, and not only people requiring that assessment and support, but also the costs of those services that have risen in that time, putting extreme pressure on our budgets and extreme pressure on our workers to act in a timely manner and to try and source the most cost-effective resources for people, whilst giving good outcomes and timescales for people. As John said, we put in a number of things to address that. I suppose the most significant for us and for the workforce is the Fair Outcomes Panel. So previously we had a level of delegated powers where workers would be able to agree and commission without a level of scrutiny on a hierarchy from worker level, manager level, senior level and then departmental management team level. We suspended all those delegated powers, not lightly, I would have to say, because that does have an impact on the throughput and performance of staff, morale of staff, etc. But just really to make sure we were having a consistent approach across the county, and that we were really looking to resource people's needs effectively. That panel consists of a senior manager, 3 senior managers each day, looking at between 20 and 30 cases each day. So it is a significant input that we're requiring, and that's for all new or increased packages. We're not scrutinising the decreases or people who have progressed on to need less support, but we are scrutinising our spend. So it's quite a significant impact on that. Early days, we only started that in September. Staff had to get used to the process, and we've had a mixed reaction to professional people having such scrutiny over their support planning, etc. But in the main, it's been received in the manner that it was put in, and we are seeing now a bit of change in practice and culture for workers to look a little more widely into the community, etc., for support, etc. The panel itself reports good outcomes on managing demand and satisfaction for people who are receiving services, that it's timely and that they're getting their outcomes met. The financial data is about 8 weeks behind, so we've yet really to see how that is coming through on the financial data, but our own monitoring gives us quite optimistic outcomes for that. Not that we'd want to continue it forever, would we, John? But for the short term, it seems to be having a good impact. Moving on then to the weights and the overall activity, you'll see in the report that we've had some success. We've introduced some additional measures since the last scrutiny report. We have followed guidance which came from Scrutiny Committee to introduce a policy and guidance document, because although we had assurance that all of the teams were managing their weights on priority risk, etc., we wanted to ensure that that was supported by guidance and that was consistent and that we could monitor and report on that. That has been introduced and that is working quite well. And there are a range of timescales. If people are waiting, which is inevitable, people will wait shorter or longer times depending on their needs, that teams and managers are keeping in touch with people who are waiting to look at what that impact is, to see whether they need to re-rate them on their priority listings, and just to really assure people that they're not forgotten and that that they will be allocated as soon as possible. Quite reassuring for me, our weights overall have gone down. Nationally, they've gone down as well, but not to the same extent that in Leicestershire we've managed to do that. We do have monitoring and oversight in place, so we have regular audits, we have reports that we can run which tell us how many people are waiting, how long they're waiting, and we have a risk matrix which tells us the priority ratings, and the movement between that shows us that people are checking and moving people up priority as they deem fit. We only have one person now who is waiting over 12 months, and I'm sure we're waiting a court process and we can't move forward with that. So that's considerably better than we were. There is a way to go, and I think that none of us would want people to wait more than they should wait. But I think we're reassured that we're moving in the right direction, and that there is that scrutiny to make sure that teams are allocating as per our operating model. So performance wise, we know that we're getting the throughput of cases that we need to get, and that we're managing on those weights. Recruitment was an issue last time, not such an issue this time, but always will be an issue. But we have managed to fill quite a lot of our vacancies. We still do have a turnover, and we still do have an issue with the rates of pay for our qualified workers as opposed to our neighbouring local authorities. But when we do get good people, we do tend to keep them, and they stay with us for a while. So fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather, very much for taking us behind the words on the report, which is exactly what we were looking for, and that was extremely useful. Betty?
And very interesting as well. It really, when you look at you're more or less saying there's a growth of around 3% per annum. How does that work out really in terms of differences in ability of the service users in terms of the packages that they get? Some will require, as you well know, some will require more support than others. Are we able to manage all of that?
You're right. There's a huge variation of abilities that come to us. What we have seen since COVID is that the increase in demand is also marked with an increase in dependency, and that we are we're looking after people in the community much longer, which is good, but they do have extra needs, etc. Coupled with the extra costs and the fact that this home care and residential care is a skilled profession, regardless of the low wage, etc. You have to have a certain amount of training and whatever. The costs, I think, have gone up. I think from my experience, we don't have any low level, easy cases anymore. Our workers are having to use their professional skills to support people as best they can and to advocate for people where they are needing support from other professionals. We're seeing a lot more court work. We're seeing a lot more mental capacity and deprivation of liberty work. So that gives you a flavour of the nature of the work that's coming through, and possibly why people may have to wait while we make sure that people are well served before we can move on to the next.
Heather, that was really very interesting. My concern is some of the issues you were talking about are very complex, and in terms of support for our professionals, can we be assured that they're getting adequate training, adequate help and adequate support? Because I know how difficult it goes into a place where people will have complex needs. How do you deal with all of that? I just want to ensure that our staff are looked after as well. Thank you.
So we're very fortunate in the department. We have 3 qualified lead practitioners who support the staff in their professional careers. We have a very good training programme. We make sure that they are able to keep up their registration with training, etc. And we have twice yearly continued professional development days where we focus on particular areas, either of new legislation or of complex professional development, etc. So I think we can be proud that we have got a good training and professional support. We also have a lot of unqualified staff, but we do the same for them. So we have the same program of training, career development days, etc. So I think professionally we try our best to keep people up to speed. It is difficult, and we don't employ people who don't care. So yeah, it's tricky, as you say, but I think I'm reassured that we've got a good training programme and supportive programme in Leicestershire.
Les?
Thanks, Chair. Thinking about future demand, and we've got some graphs here that suggest it's going to carry on increasing. But when we look at the graph on para 12, SU numbers, there's a clear plateau at this moment in time. Now, I'm a big fan of moving average trends anyway, so I'm quite happy to see that. Well, no, I understand why the forecast might be growth. I guess there's two questions for me as to what some of those impacts could be, what's cause and effect, I guess. So historically, I think it's 3%. Now we're looking at 6% growth. And we're all very, very good at talking about this post-COVID world. So two parts of the same question about future growth and demand. So one is, are we able to determine how much of the increased growth and demand is as a result of COVID, or where COVID has had an impact on existing conditions and made the individual worse? So that's kind of question one, because potentially, therefore, is there a plateau? Once those people are in the system, there's potentially a plateau position. And then the second question is actually going back into the early years side of the world. We have more and more children with EHCPs, with special educational needs and disabilities. By default, those children will grow to be young adults and then older adults. So I can see your graph goes here 2025 and a little bit past that. What does the future look like? I mean, it's a big question and it's a very big crystal ball. I'm just curious, COVID impact can we determine is the one? And B, what do those children that are coming through the system going to look like in the future?
Go at some of that, if that's okay. So in terms of growth, there are a number of factors at play. And certainly when you look at these sorts of graphs, and when we first started looking at this data, it kind of leads you into a path of thinking this is all about new people coming through the system. Actually, what we found was that's not entirely the case. So part of the reason why we've got additional growth is that people aren't leaving the service in the way they did. So if we look back over a number of years, people starting a service roughly equaled people leaving the service. What we've seen since the pandemic over the last 2 years is that numbers of people leaving the service has reduced. So people are staying longer. We haven't got the same turnover. So you've got the people coming through, but people aren't leaving, and therefore your overall number grows and grows. In addition to that, we have seen increased numbers of people, and particularly from hospital discharge. And for the first time, the numbers of new starts in home care from hospital discharge is outstripping the community new starts. And I think if we look at the discharge numbers, the numbers of people being discharged into with a social care, requiring a social care assessment, hasn't significantly altered. But the proportion that then go on to receive social care has increased a lot. So we'd get a number of people every month who come through from hospital discharge who we would assess, and a number of those people who we assess will go on to receive a service. And it's that proportion that's increased from, well, it's over doubled. So there are some factors which are leading to an increased number of people requiring a service. Whether or not that's to do with COVID, whether it's to do with people being on a waiting list for treatment for longer, whether it's to do with people's long-term conditions deteriorating over that period, or because they haven't received treatment in the same time the way that they might have done pre-pandemic, they therefore have a higher level of need when they do receive the treatment, or they're not recovering as quickly. There is an element, I think, which then leads on to higher packages of care. So there are a number of things at play. One of the things we do know is that our mantra for the last number of years, as committee will know, is been around promoting people's independence wherever possible. We want people to be as independent as possible at home. It's the best place for people. If people receive home care for a period of weeks and are not within that initial period of, and it's roughly about 12 weeks actually, if people don't recover to a large degree within that 12-week period, they're likely to become dependent on the service. So one of the things that we looked at is the number of people who we are reviewing within that first few weeks, and the numbers of people who are becoming being able to regain their independence within that period, and we know that that's reduced. Now, some of that might be down to the conditions that people have got, and some of it might be down to our activity. So we are trying to address that by putting in some early review work to try, and again, that also plays into this notion that actually we've got fewer people leaving than we had previously. Because if you don't get people to a point where they are more independent and don't require the home care service within the first few weeks, chances are they're going to need it for a long time to come. So there's quite a few factors that are at play. And it's a very complicated picture, but it's not all about new people or coming through the system. Some of it is about actually people not leaving it in the way that they did before, people not being as independent as they were before, and requiring services for a longer period of time.
I'm glad I've got you, or we've got you, and Heather. This is horrendously complicated, isn't it? Trying to future-proof and anticipate demand. One little extra question then is, are we seeing people entering the system younger than historically?
If you're talking about the 18 to 65s, I think we are seeing people entering our support earlier. So people who traditionally would have stayed with families, etc. I think there is an expectation that we start earlier with their preparation for their independence, etc. So I think you were talking about transition and children coming through. I think we are seeing an earlier preparation for adulthood than we've ever seen before, and an expectation that people will achieve their own independence, their own tenancies, etc. So there are more of that group coming through. I don't think we are, well, yeah, actually, I think we are seeing the impact of dementia and early onset dementia in our 60 pluses, whereas previously we would have seen it in our 70, 80 pluses. So I think that is coming through. We do have more younger, older people in our system than we had before.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Heather, John. I just say wow. Thank you.
Any other members have any questions? I've addressed highlight on this one. I think paragraph 37, which I thought was excellent, which shows just how much we're achieving as a council vis-a-vis others. My question, the final question, would be: you mentioned right at the start, Heather, about obviously the financial analysis which will go into this year's budget. How confident are you that the work you started in September will give us enough robust data on which to base what the budget might look like when it comes to the budgeting round? Do you think that will give us enough time to give us as the best guesstimate that we can get to?
I think the key word there is guesstimate. Yes, indeed. So, as you know, the way that our financial planning, our medium-term financial planning works is that we start the preparation in terms of what our growth figures will look like and what the demand pressures will be next year and the year after. We start that work really in September, October for the next April. So the figures that we're looking at the moment won't necessarily take into account the evidence that we will hopefully get towards the end of November and December on the programme of work that we've undertaken. We can only predict growth as we can see it coming through in that sort of October period. Now, obviously, that creates a bit of a problem for us in that the demands and the growth that we're predicting at the moment are extremely large based on the graphs that you've seen in the report today. Some of that may be mitigated by the work that we're doing. We are in conversation now with finance colleagues about how we can describe that best. So do we mitigate the growth down do we make an assumption that we're going to have an impact and we therefore reduce our growth level within the financial plan? Could do that, although there is some risk to that, because if the programme of work doesn't have the results that we'd hope to see, we would have lower growth than we would need, and we'd therefore be straight into an overspending position next year. Another way of doing it would be to keep the growth as it is now, as it looks like it's going to be in October of this year, and then put in a savings plan against that to take account of the work that we're doing. So we put the high level of growth in, and then we put a savings to mitigate, to net off. That's an option that we could do, but again, you do run the risk of potentially overspending if the savings don't come through. But there is a deadline, as you know, where we have to make a decision, and it's likely to be a mitigated kind of decision around our best guesstimate at a point in time, probably in December.
Thanks for that, John. I suppose the only final comment I'll make as well is thank you for continuing to fight the good fight with the ICB, rather you than me. Let us hope that we see some results out of it in the not too distant future. But we've had the report, and I think we've noted the comments and you've picked up. So thank you very much for that, Heather. I know we'll see you again in a minute, so don't stray too far. But we're now moving on to agenda item 10, which is charging for social care and policy support, which is pages 45 to 110. Now, this is where I get confused because I've got a Tracy on my thing, but we've actually got a Steve. So welcome, Tracy, who's turned into Steve. So I think you're going to kick us off, John, and then no doubt pass over to Steve.
Thanks, Chair. So unfortunately, Tracy can't be with us today, so Steve stepped in. Steve is the head of service for this area of work, so he's fully conversant with the work that's taken place. The report is there to advise members of proposed changes to the Council's charging policy for adult social care ahead of a consultation on those proposed changes. Following the consultation, a draft report will be presented to County Council Cabinet in the new year, seeking approval for the new charging policy from April. So members are invited to comment on the proposed changes ahead of consultation process. It may well be that in order to implement from April next year, we might not be in a position to be able to bring a full report of the consultation back to committee ahead of Cabinet. If that's the case, obviously we will advise committee members of the outcome of the consultation and invite comment outside of committee if that's okay.
Thank you. So as John says, this policy, it's been there for several years, keeps being updated to make sure that it's in line predominantly with the rulings from the Ombudsman, but if there's been any legal cases such as the Norfolk judgment, it needs to reflect those sorts of things. And there was something you'll see in the policy, for instance, that takes account of disregards against people's income in line with things that happen in a wider national context, such as the Grenfell fire. So we do keep on top of it. It was last updated in 2022, but there was no consultation at that time. We have spoken to legal services this time and looked to see whether we're advised to go to consultation, which they did say that we should go to consultation to get some broad feedback. As I say, it's been out there for a while. But also just to ensure that we've got a robust and as watertight and as unambiguous a policy as we possibly can have, and also to demonstrate that we have consulted widely on this policy, because people get quite hot under the collar at times about the way that we want to charge for adult social care, and that can be prone people who don't want to pay for it. It could be people who are taxpayers of Leicestershire who think we are being perhaps a bit too generous in our policy. So you get both sides of the coin. But in the policy, as I say, it's our changes. You'll see from the papers that you've got. You've actually got the policy document that's quite lengthy, quite detailed, but it does does have to be in that format because it explains how we take income and both revenue and capital into account, what people are counted as disregards, and how property is taken into account when we look at how we charge. But you'll see from Appendix B, what we've done there is trying to give you a little bit of commentary to explain some of the changes. You'll see that the majority of changes are actually to do with clarification of wording, and again to make things as unambiguous as possible. It is, as I say, quite a complicated area, certainly in some of the cases that we have to deal with. But those clarifications are in that policy because either the Ombudsman has ruled on a particular case, not necessarily with our local authority. We tend to have quite good feedback from the Ombudsman whenever we've got complaints and challenges. It's usually from other authorities how they've ruled on that, and we want to reflect that. But also through some of the practice and some of the queries that we get as an adult social care finance function, we want to make it clear to the people reading the policy that is what we mean. So out of the sort of 19 changes, you'll probably see that 80%, probably more of those, are to do with clarifications of wording, just to make it, as I say, unambiguous, more robust. It's not about us going in, changing the charging rate, changing the statutory thresholds. It's nothing to do with that. We're not going to go around to people and say, oh, you've suddenly got to pay us an extra £5 a month. It's not designed to do that. It's about clarifications about how we put the policy in place. And perhaps for the committee's benefit, the sort of analogy you might have is it's a bit like sometimes you receive something from the bank and they want to update the terms and conditions of a policy they've already got in place. That is what we're trying to do here, just make it, as I say, as unambiguous as possible. And I think the only other thing I will mention is we are looking forward to put in place a new method of how we assess couples. Again, it's quite a complicated area. To try and make sure that the position of a partner is more protected. As I say, it replaces quite a complex couples adjustment that we have to do at the moment. We want to simplify that, partly for our own processes, because it will allow us to do some internal improvements, but also, as I say, to give partners more protection. So that should be beneficial to most people.
Thanks, Steve. Bill?
Thanks, Chair. Very interested in this particular bit, but I looked at on page 50, page 55, looking at some of the criteria there. I'll pick my words carefully now, Chair. It's been brought to my attention that you don't ask if these people have got any properties abroad. It says main home. Now, I know one particular case, this gentleman has got property abroad and he sold the property abroad and it brought him in best part of £1 million. But he still qualifies for some of these things. And I can't quite get my head around that. Why is that allowed? You know, he may not have declared it, he may not have to declare it. But it doesn't seem like to me somebody is, you know, reasonably well off should get benefits from this authority.
Yeah, I mean, each person's financial circumstances, we have to take those into account, and we do have to, as I say, follow quite particular guidance. I will go and speak to people about how we do take property abroad and whether we do need to put that in. But assets, usually on the charging policy, if you've got assets of more than 23,250, then you're expected to be a full cost payer. And it's only when you fall below that threshold. I mean, unfortunately, we do have cases where people do try and it's called deprivation of assets. but I'll go and have another look.
So just, Steve said every assessment is undertaken as an individual assessment because every circumstances are different. It also would depend potentially on whether it was a residential provision or a non-residential provision. So certainly if a person were seeking residential care, any property, whether a home or abroad, would count towards the 23,000 threshold. And if you had a property, then you would be a self-funder. You'd be funding your own care, and there'd be a 12-week disregard period, and then you'd have to fund your own care. If it were a non-residential service, the value of the asset that you live in doesn't dictate whether or not you are eligible, because we'd be looking at income, not assets. So any of us, might live in a very, very valuable property, but have very little income. And it would be the income that would determine whether or not the council supported on a non-residential care package as opposed to the asset in that case. Unless, of course, you're earning money from your asset, in which case it would become income. But, yeah.
Either way, we would take that into account in the financial assessment.
Are you happy with that, Bill? Or do you want to come back? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. You should prompt you to really odd question. So, certainly when my mother, some time ago, went through the system, she built up a debt to the county authority, payable upon her demise and sale of the asset. You know how much money we've actually got sitting owed to us through that process? And the second part of that question is there a percentage of that that's at risk? Because that's physical cash that is owed to the authority.
Yes. So in short, the answer is yes. We have a large amount of debt that's owed to the authority. That debt is managed by our corporate finance colleagues. They manage it in various different ways depending on the nature of the debt. So some of that debt is held debt. Some of it is pending payment. Some of it is in litigation. Some of it is in various different stages. But we do have a very large amount of debt that's owed to the authority. We'd have to bring a separate report. All I can say is it's a good 7 figures.
Thanks, Chair. And I think the supplementary question to that then is, when that money comes back, does it get recycled back into adults, or does it disappear elsewhere?
Well, it's corporate debt, so it goes against the corporate account. We are an authority that we have an income against social care of £70 million a year. So you can imagine that debt sort of builds up and it paid back over 10,000 people paying contributions towards care. It's quite a fluctuating position, but it's corporate debt, so it's held against the corporate account.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Chair.
Anyone else got any further questions? Clearly, the result is not to have a property abroad, or perhaps have several properties abroad. But I did think, reading the paper, I'm sure that assets is covered in there. I can't find the right section, but I'm 90% certain it does talk about assets, and it talks about asset disposal to try and reduce your liabilities within the paper. So I think it's it. I'll take on board the comments you made, John, about you might not be able to come back to this committee, which I think we always find disappointing if it's before. But I think in this particular case, I don't think it's as relevant as to most. But I think the committee would be happy, as you've already offered, to make sure we get that information sent to us if it comes to it. I don't think in this one it's as relevant as many others, because we are where we are, and as Steve says, we're largely following government policy and litigation that's come to fruition. So, you know, we're not an outlier with anyone else. I think Leslie's point is the interesting one, but I've always understood exactly the same, is that we operate as adults community, looking at what we're going to spend this year, and that any receipts go into the central pot, which go into our reserves, which is then available to adults communities along with others, should they need to draw it based on the points we were just discussing with Heather about our best guesstimates of things. So I think that's why it's never come back to this committee, I think understandably, because it sits in the assets bit, which would probably come under scrutiny commission largely during the budget process, which has always been my understanding of it. So I think we're happy with that. I think if we've got no particular recommendations to make to Cabinet, apart from I think we're all comfortable with the report, largely comfortable with the report. A couple of minor questions which I think we would ask if Steve could answer, particularly Bill's point, and obviously keep Cabinet in the loop as well, so they can take that into consideration. But apart from that, I think we're happy with the direction of travel on this report, unless anyone throws anything at me or says otherwise. So thank you for that, and thank you very much, Steve. We're now moving on to agenda item 11, which will no doubt be very illuminating. Yes, I know. Yeah. Which is the light bulb service business case. Sorry for the pun. That was just to give Heather time to get in place, which is pages 111 to 222. Now, we couldn't have done that if we tried, could we? 111 to 222. And we have Heather with us, and we also have Katie Griffiths. God, words out today, with us. So welcome. And again, the Cabinet are looking for us to make a recommendation, either in line with the recommendation within the report when we get to the end of our discussions, or another recommendation as we see fit. So if we bear that in mind during the discussion, and same process as before, please, John, Heather, and Katie.
Chair. So as members will know, and be aware, Lightbulb's partnership between the County Council and the District and Borough Councils to provide housing related support and adaptations. The agreement's been in place since 2017. It was timely to undertake a review of the business case, and that's taken place over the last 6 months. And today's report seeks comment from committee on the options for the future of the service following the review. So I'll hand over to Heather and Katie to take through the details.
Thanks, John. So hope we all know and love Lightbulb, where we've lived and breathed it over a number of years. I think we shouldn't underestimate the national recognition that the programme has had, and the recognition of the joint working between not only the councils, but between the councils and the county council. And I have to say, having been part of it from the beginning, that has been hard work, but it has been worth it. And I think, you know, we are in a better place now than we were when we started in, you know, our understanding of each other's priorities and agendas, but also working together. We, when we had the project as it was, before it moved into business as usual, we had a number of issues that we worked through, and finally, after a year of that programme, we were able as a county council to delegate some of our statutory responsibilities around assessments for minor aids and adaptations and minor housing works to Blaby District Council on behalf of the Lightbulb programme, and that's where we've been so far. That did enable us to concentrate our occupational therapy staff within the council on the more complex and professional assessments and recommendations that go along with housing solutions, freeing them up by putting in housing support coordinators who could take people through what we call the housing MOT, which looks holistically at housing solutions and coordinating people through that process with a number of contractors, organisations, etc. We are due to now renew that, and that's due in the new contract needs to be in place for April next year. So we are at a critical point. People will, I think, remember that all of the district councils, bar one, came fully on board with the programme from when we moved out of project to programme, and Charnwood Borough Council remains only part members of the scheme. The report sets out really the options for going forward, which include Charnwood Borough Council opting in or opting out. And it's fair to say that they've had their own independent review alongside this. We were, Katie and I, hoping that we would have had some information by now from that, because I think we were expecting that following executive committee 2 weeks ago. But we haven't had that through, so I can't enlighten you on what that report says, but that will come through shortly. We're bringing you the very draft business case with the options, because until it's been through Blaby District Council's Chief Executive Board in January, it's not available for the rounds for the rest, but we were able to negotiate to have this come to scrutiny, so we could have your input in that for recommendations to Cabinet when we go to Cabinet. I think it's February time, isn't it? Yeah. So there are three options on the table, and the first is to more or less continue as we are with a service level agreement extension, looking at the possibilities of for the County Council, the inclusion of the Minor Aids and Adaptation Service, which is the one service that we still retain outside of Lightbulb, but was in scope for Lightbulb in the very beginning. And that's to do some option appraisals, etc. And that would be looking at using some of the district's disabled facilities grant to pay for equipment and or staffing of an adaptations team, which would be the technical fitting of and maintenance of that equipment. The second option is for us to take that on board if people are in agreement and progress that work sooner rather than later. And the third, both of those options require Charnwood not to carry on as part of Lightbulb, because we can't carry on as the business as usual with that. The third option, which is our preferred option and is the preferred option of Blaby, who are the hosts of the programme, is that Charnwood fully commit to the programme and that we move ahead with the transfer of minor adaptations into the Lightbulb programme, which would mean we would have a whole housing solution, county and district and borough together to move forward, which looks to us the best option for people who live in Leicestershire and the best option for the council to continue to deliver the services. There are some costings in there, which I'm sure you've gone through. Just for me then to say that in addition to those costings, we do still provide an occupational therapy assessment service for the districts working alongside of Lightbulb, which is retained in-house and funded in-house and not included in the contributions.
Betty.
This is something, I move this to the side, it'd be better. This is something I've been following for quite some time and quite interested in it as well. And I would actually, when I looked at all the options, I think option 3, which is the, as it's down here, is the all-in option. And I would hope that we would support option 3. That's the one I personally would want to support. And I think we need to ensure that we get that support from all the districts, and I can't see why not. If it's sold to them, it looks the best way forward for me. Thank you, Chair.
Liz.
Thank you, Chair. And I think this is actually a really easy one. Lightbulb's brilliant. It just is. I mean, it's just one of those things that some very clever people had an idea about at some point. But my word, that's a sensible thing to do. Isn't that logical? And it just makes the most efficient use of money expertise, resource, and just makes people's lives better, quicker. What's not to like? It's brilliant. Option 3, Charnwood, please sign up and come on board. Thank you, Chair.
Any other comments, questions from members? I think I would just add to what's been said. I mean, I've lived and breathed this both sides of the fence for the last 10 odd years or whatever it is. I think you hit the nail on the head, Heather, really, when I think this is an exemplar of how districts and counties should always work together for the benefit of all the residents of Leicestershire. Because I think this takes the strength of both the upper and lower tier authorities, combines them together, and residents don't care whether we're upper or lower tier. What they care about is they have a far, far better system than they've ever had. I like Les and Betty, are a devotee of the system. I think it works. The only niggle I have still, and John knows this, is this ridiculous differentiation between capital and revenue funding, and that we should be able to use the money we're sitting on for the benefit of the residents. I don't care whether it's under a year or over a year. And I personally have always advocated sometimes that perhaps we need to perhaps just do things and worry about the consequences after them, but probably not allowed to say that, so clearly I haven't. But I would certainly support option 3. I think the option of Charnwood staying half in, half out has reached a point of no return. And therefore, I think we have certainly two councillors already said option 3. My vote would go for option 3. I don't think it's sustainable. I think I would use my role as chairman of this committee to publicly urge Charnwood to actually finally fully commit, because I still think we would be better with all 8 of us rather than 7 of us, because that would cause us here additional problems which we really don't need at this time of budgetary constraints, and I'm sure it would save overall Charnwood money. So I would urge Charnwood to bring that report out as soon as possible, make sure everybody sees it and knows where they stand, and then we can move forward. But I think I'm speaking on behalf of all of the committee when I say option 3, unless anyone's thrown at me. So brilliant system, run excellently by all of the authorities. Something we desperately want to retain, and our full recommendation to County Cabinet will be we must stay in, we must deliver option 3, and we must move forward and do more and more of this for our residents. And I know that our portfolio holder supports this as well. So that would be our comments going forward. Committee happy with that? Of course.
I'm sitting here as a substitute for the leader of Charnwood Council.
I'm sure, Betty, you'll be able to use your very, very kind officers, to sort this out for us. Thank you. Your final one from Liz.
Yeah, I think you raised a really important point around DFG, and I've got some vain hope that there's a minister listening, but they're not. But we do have, and for those members and colleagues who are not familiar with Lightbulb, we have the most bizarre situation where we can modify a ramp to access a house, but we can't change the colour scheme in the house and make it dementia friendly. It's absolutely crazy, because one's capital and one's not. So actually, is there an opportunity as it goes through Cabinet for representation to be made to HMG and say, can we have some flexibility on DFG? I think it's just nonsense. We should be here with funding to make people's lives better. It's as simple as that. Thanks, Joe.
We can't get more positive than that all afternoon. So thank you very much, Heather and Katie. And I think you can see how much it means to us as a committee across the whole of the county. We're reflecting probably all parts of the county here, and I think it just shows how valued this service is. So thank you. We're now moving on to the final substantive report today, which is an update on the Archives, Collections and Learning Centre, which is pages 223 to 240. I don't think we've ever discussed this topic before. That was tongue-in-cheek. I was just giving time for Fran to take her seat. So again, I think John will introduce and Fran will take over. But I think at least it looks like we're approaching a decision stage. Dare I say? I said that about 6 years ago, but perhaps we are this time.
Thank you, Chair. So we'll try and remain positive. As you've noted, the committee have received various reports on previously on the proposed development of an archives, collections and learning centre, sometimes known as a hub proposal. Over the last 5 years, there was a bit of a pause through the pandemic that did slow us down for a couple of years, to be fair. But today's report provides committee with an update on the work completed and the latest position with regards to the proposed development. And I'll ask Fran to take you through the detail.
Thank you, Chair. And I think when we first discussed it, I didn't need glasses. So paragraphs 2 to 6 of your report just points out that the project supports 3 of the County Council strategic outcomes. So great communities, clean and green and improving opportunities. Also supports the Council's energy strategy and adults and communities delivering wellbeing and opportunity. In addition, it will help the authority meet its statutory obligations for archive service set out in the Local Government Act 1972. As always, do you reference the last time you had a report on this was in 2019, and that was at that time setting out the steps we were going to take to develop a costed design proposal to bring together the County Council's archive, museum and learning collections and resources with essential associated facilities, including record office, search room, conservation studios and spaces to facilitate public access to collections and resources. Also referenced in the report is that the design proposal addresses the document storage requirements for registration services. So as John's alluded to, work on the development was paused in March 2020 due to the pandemic and then revived again in 2022 following an internal review. So the costed design proposal that's shared with you today has been developed following some detailed work, which includes a range of surveys and the engagement of relevant expertise, including architects, structural, civil, mechanical and electrical engineers, and also a racking specialist. The design proposal has been developed to REBA Stage 1 and has an upper cost estimate of £38 million. This figure has been calculated to reflect likely increases prior to an indicative construction date of September 2025 and also reflects industry indexing costs and provides for inflation and construction industry pressures. If the design is progressed through the REBA stages, so that's 2 through to 4, increased cost certainty will be achieved. You have an appendix which contains some visuals that's been provided by the architects. So I'll try to just briefly explain what you're seeing. So the first figure shows what an entrance area might look like. So towards the left of the picture, you can see the current Eastern Annex building and the bit in the front is existing building. And then the block towards the right of the picture is the new strong room. Figure 2 gives an aerial view, which is probably easier for you to orientate if you're familiar with that part of County Hall. So you can see the existing East Annex building and then the new strong room to the front. It's a minimum demolition proposal, so we haven't got lots of demolition costs, and it also retains all of the existing car parking and also those mature trees, which if people are familiar with the building, sort of in that area. Figure 3 is a ground floor layout, so showing sort of spatial allocations and adjacencies, and it might be quite small to pick out. So if I just orientate the main part, so the large green rectangle at the front is the strong room for the archive. The light green area immediately behind is the search room facility, and that's a single search room. Unlike where we have at Wigston at the moment, we have a reception area that has to be invigilated and then 2 separate search rooms. It'll be one space, so easier for staff to support members of the public when they're coming in to use. The light blue block to the left is a sort of modest exhibition and display space. And then as you move behind into the orange, you have the entrance area we saw in figure 1. And then the large orange space is creative learning services, library and resources area. You can also see toilets, changing spaces, a research room, a small meeting room where we can receive document donations or a more discreet space to meet with members of the public.
You've got loading bays, quarantine and swing space in the dark green area to the right. And then to the left of the plan, you can see the main museum collection storage areas, and the different blocks indicate different types of collection and storage solution for there. And there are a range of things ranging from locomotives to large vehicles, so that's had to be thought through in quite a lot of detail. And then figure 4 shows the first floor layout, which also includes office space for the different staff members that we're moving into that building, an archive conservation studio, a photography/digital studio that will support our ongoing digitalisation work and research room. There's also space there for plant, which is over to the left in grey, and then the museum storage on the other side. And then the final illustration, I think, is a racking solution for the archive strong rooms. This uses double-decker roller racking instead of a fixed first floor. That gives us a more efficient use of the space and avoids excessive floor loading. Some of you will be familiar with the problems we have with the first floor strong room at Wigston, which is due to excessive floor loading. So that would eliminate that issue. And if you work in museums and archives, we're really the design proposal accommodates the key requirements for the service areas, and as is referenced in paragraph 15, it's consolidated and reduced the current space that those services occupy, despite the fact that we have added 25 years expansion space for the Record Office as is required by the National Archive. Worth being aware that in addition, the museum service has had an active programme of collections rationalisation since 2018, and that's reduced storage requirements for museums by a further 1,200 square metres. Paragraphs 19 to 25 really go through the main drivers for the project, and one of the key ones of those is around retaining accreditation service status for the archive service and the museums. The Record Office is submitting its accreditation application this week, and this paper will form part of the submission, and the need to resolve the storage situation was raised during our previous assessment, and progress will be expected. Paragraphs 26 to 30 just set out the current partnership arrangements for the Record Office, which we deliver in partnership with Leicester City and Rutland County Council. Each partner makes a proportionate revenue contribution towards annual running costs, and discussions with partners on making a proportionate capital contribution towards the project are in progress. Paragraphs 31 to 36 highlight that the centre is being designed to be energy efficient and contribute towards the Council's net zero carbon commitment, and the archive strong room is a key element of that and is being designed with thermal mass principles. That's to ensure that any temperature fluctuations are minimised, and that helps us reduce energy costs and carbon impact. And you'll also see that the design provides for 50% of the Eastern Annex roof to be fitted with photovoltaic panels. Paragraphs 37 to 43 pick out the key risks associated with the centre, including risks of not progressing the storage solution and the implications of losing accreditation are both reputational and financial. It's fair to say the ACL Centre is a significant capital scheme, and this proposal is at an early REBA stage. We have done additional work to try and reduce the level of unquantifiable risks, and those are listed in paragraph 40 of your report. And paragraphs 46 to 55 summarise the resource implications. Currently, there's no provision in the Council's medium-term financial strategy for this project, and in order to progress the design beyond REBA stage 1, an allocation would need to be made. If the centre was to be delivered, it would enable the council to release 6 sites. They currently cost around £309,000 per annum to run. These could be decommissioned, leases terminated or buildings sold. It's anticipated that the current Record Office site in Wigston and the Sherrier Centre in Lutterworth could be sold, and they would realise a capital receipt. And there are 2 buildings that are owned by the council which could be commercially leased to generate income. Just as a reminder, the current buildings we occupy are the Collections and Resources Centre at Barrow. That's leased by the County Council at around £50,000 per annum. There's the Sharia Centre in Lutterworth, which is owned by LCC, as is the Record Office in Wigston. We have an industrial unit in Colville, which is part of the County Council's Investing in Leicestershire portfolio, as is a unit at Riverside Court in Measham. So those both could be released to be commercially leased to bring in income. We occupy a number of buildings on the Snibston site in Colville, and we also occupy parts of the Eastern Annex, which is also owned by County Council. The lease sites will have some dilapidation costs. We don't have figures for those at the moment. They're being worked up by property, and those would be a cost of the council at some stage, although this project would bring them forward. The condition surveys for those buildings have estimated maintenance costs of around £3 million over the next 3 to 5 years, with 1.5 million of those sitting within the priority 1 and priority 2 areas. So those costs would be potentially could be avoided if the centre was progressed. It's not possible at this stage in the design development, which is quite early, to quantify the future running costs of the centre, but as highlighted earlier, the building is being designed to be efficient and sustainable. In terms of next steps, additional investment is required to develop the project through the REBA stages, and this is being put forward to the capital programme, and a report will be taken to Cabinet as part of the MTFS forward plan. And just to close, this would represent a major capital commitment at a time of significant financial challenge for the authority, but does offer a long-term solution to what has been a significant challenge for us in terms of our commitment to care for and make accessible the cultural and historic heritage of Leicestershire. Thanks, Chair.
I too didn't need glasses when we started this process to read either. Anyone got any comments, questions? Les?
I think in that presentation, thank you, my laptop's decided to run out off at the minute. Did you say you're building in capacity for 25 years expansion or future proofing for 25 years? Why only 25? Because they're ad infinitum records, so just curious, why 25?
Primarily, it's what the TNA advised, and obviously any additional space that we build in is quite significant additional cost. It's quite difficult to estimate what might come in over 25 years. So the way we've made that assessment is we've looked at what's coming over another period of years and worked that back up. We should also make the point that we are only factoring in expansion space for record office collections. There's no expansion space for museum collections, but there's no statutory requirement with regard to that element.
Anyone else? I'll just make a few comments. I mean, I'd probably been on this committee longer than most. I mean, I remember in the days when I didn't need reading glasses that when we first looked at this, the cost was 16 million of changing the Eastern Annex. We then looked at having a separate records office out the front of this building rather than merging it together. Yeah, we're now at 38 million. This is something we have to do. This isn't a nice thing to do. This is something we are legally required to do. The costs of inaction, particularly if we lose our accreditation, would be enormous. I suppose my only comments would be, my personal view is I think 2025 is too late. We should be going for 2024. So we should be putting the money aside in this budget for it. Any delay is going to add to those costs even further. And again, you've already highlighted that, you know, 3 million potential savings by not having to maintain other buildings is already there in the ether. But my only slight disappointment in the report is there should be a deadline in there by which county and the city and Rutland have to make a decision on whether they're going to come in or out and their contribution to it. Might be sensible to go to the city earlier because Peter Salisbury was in the paper or on the TV last week saying they're going to be bust by 2025 in the city. So we might as well get some money out of him before they go bust. But I just think, with the agreement of the committee, I just think we should recommend through particularly our portfolio holder, who I know feels very largely the same as we do on this, that Cabinet really grasp the nettle now, look to make provision available, look to get this project off the ground. And I, for one, and hopefully you as the committee would agree that we'd rather like to start this earlier than later. I think the time for not making a decision is over. The time for making a decision is here. I think we must make a decision. We must move forward. And I just think it will overall, over a large number of years, save this council a fortune, because what this report doesn't conclude either is if we do nothing, we retain those buildings. It might be 3 million over the next 2 or 3 years. What's it going to be over the next 25, 50 years? You know, those maintain those buildings will cost us that much, whereas a new building with its energy efficiency will save us overall money. So I don't know if committee believe that's a recommendation we should make to Cabinet. As you know, it's my suggestion, but I'd happily propose that as a recommendation to Cabinet, Bill.
If Cabinet don't agree to find the money for this, what's plan B?
In fairness, because we knew this was a massive capital ask, we've tried to exhaust all possibilities of alternatives, and this does seem to be the only option if the organisation wants to continue to deliver all of the elements that sit within the hub. I think there would be discussions about whether or not the county council can continue to support all of those areas of activity. So that's probably a discussion at a higher level.
I think, Bill, the major ones will be the records office we have to do. You can look at the collections. Now, a lot of the collection we can't dispose of because we're not allowed to under the way it was gifted to us. We have worked through a policy of taking things out of our collection where possible. I mean, this committee, as you know, recently had the update on the aeroplane, for instance, that was released elsewhere. So I think, you know, the collections committee have been very prudent in looking at the best location for some of the collections where it might be better housed rather than here. But also I do think, you know, we do owe a duty to the people of Leicestershire to maintain some of their heritage and make it available, is my personal view. And I think this perhaps would enable that. Is there a plan B? My personal view is I don't think there is. Let us hope that Cabinet agree with us. I appreciate in these current financial times, it's difficult, but you know, I just think, you know, we would have been £22 million better off if we'd done this 6-8 years ago. If we don't make the decision for another 3 years, how much more worse off are we going to be? So are we happy as a committee to make a recommendation?
We said some of the buildings we already own anyway, so that cost will fall on anyway, won't it? I mean, unless we dispose of the building entirely, we've still got to maintain those buildings.
Well, that's my whole point. If we put everything in one building.
Yeah, apart from the two that we don't own, which we lease out, which there may be some work done before they let them go, but I don't know what the terms of lease were to when we took them on. Is it full repairing lease or not? I don't know.
I suspect it is from the comments made about dilapidations.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's only on one building. So the rest we own. We already own the Eastern Annex. So if you'd imagine the cost savings are enormous because we don't have to worry about acquiring land. We've already got the shell of a building, most of which is going to be used with some upgrades. So overall, I think there are significant merits in this recommendation. And also accessibility becomes somewhat easier with proper car parking, proper accessibility. I mean, for those of us that have been to Barrow, I mean, it's great to go there, but I mean, it's you took the words out of my mouth, Betty, but it's almost impossible to see things. And I think our teams at all locations are doing a sterling job in difficult circumstances maintaining the collection. But my concern, and I know I went on visits with Christine, is that, you know, will they be able to conserve these things in new world ways much longer in the accommodation they've got? And my personal view is that they won't. So are we happy to recommend to Cabinet that we would like this progressed at the earliest possible stage and that we are perfectly comfortable with the recommendation, and hopefully that we can achieve this before Fran needs even stronger glasses and I've given up altogether. We're happy. Thank you. That was the last substantive last substantive report. The date of the next meeting, you'll be happy to know, is after Christmas. So presumably this is where I say Happy Christmas, Merry Christmas, Happy New Year, which will be on Monday the 22nd of January 2024 at 2 p.m. The There are no urgent items, and I therefore calls the meeting to a close. Because I thank all of those who attended today, all those who've given reports, and any members of the public who've taken the time, effort and trouble to listen in. I hope you found it interesting. So thank you all.